All right. From internet security to social media propaganda and the influence industry. And I understand we have the maven of persuasion, Dr. Emma Briant, writer, analyst, journalist, research consultant. You can read her at emma-bryant.co.uk. The only woman who knows how many actual diseases that Hillary Clinton would have died of had she been elected.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for inviting me here. Okay, hi everyone. Okay, so at the moment I'm working on a new book called Propaganda Machine Inside Cambridge Analytica and the Digital Influence Industry. I'm an academic from Bard College, and basically I've been involved over the last couple of years in exposing Cambridge Analytica, the Trump campaign digital company, digital analytics firm, along with, along with Chris Vickery. I will refer a little bit to what he was talking about, and I'm not going to go over the same kinds of territory. But I want to set the scene initially. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Stasi in East Germany. These are some images, as you can see, of their surveillance. And I want you to have a think about just how, what great lengths they used to go to do surveillance back in those days, okay? These are people who would embed wires in the walls and doors, establish social groups in order to get people spying on each other, reporting on each other, incentivize that kind of spying and reporting back. They would break into little teenagers' bedrooms, like that one just there, and take these kinds of surveillance photographs. Can you imagine the amount of infrastructure that had to be built up in order to do that back then? Now, let's bring us forward to today, okay? We now have this kind of data surveillance equipment in our own pockets. We buy it and get very excited and install all the apps. We've been doing it now for many years, and there's a hell of a lot of data out there that is being breached all the time, as we've heard from the press. Alexa is listening, and we're very happy. We're broadcasting this on Facebook right now. And that should fill everybody with absolute terror if you knew what I knew and have learned over the last sort of 10 to 15 years from studying propaganda. There's a fantastic new book which I recommend by Shoshana Zuboff about surveillance capitalism. This basically goes into all of how this kind of surveillance infrastructure has been built up, encompassing our entire social world. Facebook over the last couple of years has dominated the US scandal, but I want you to have a think about just how much data you are creating on a daily, minute-by-minute basis. Now, Cambridge Analytica, the Trump campaign digital firm, they also worked in the United Kingdom on Brexit and all around the world in various different campaigns, were utilizing many different kinds of data, matching it with the voter file, as we've heard, with the help of AIQ in Canada, and doing personality tests and other kinds of research to see if they could enrich that data file and target people more effectively with different kinds of messaging. Looking at people, what would trigger people most effectively to change their behaviors. They were a company that was built around the idea of how do we do modern day behavioral modification, basically. You can see here they worked, first of all, in the United States in the midterms. That was 2013 to 14 they were first set up. But they had a parent company. And I was studying the parent company before that, during my previous research. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second. You can see also some examples of the kind of messaging that they were putting out during these campaigns. The two ads on the top right are for John Bolton's campaign, and as you can see, it's very fear-driven messaging, which won't surprise you if you know John Bolton. In some of the interviews that I did before the company had collapsed, I was already very much heavily researching Cambridge Analytica and SCL Group, the parent company. I got told by the CEO of the parent company, Trump had the balls, really the balls, to say what people wanted to hear. And what Cambridge Analytica were going to do was to amplify that and to get it right to the right groups that would really resonate with this kind of message. Now they were being funded by the Mercers, as I'm sure many of you know. The Mercers Family Foundation had, by 2015, a massive kind of infrastructure, an operation basically pumping out anti-Clinton and ultra-conservative propaganda, funded by $24.5 million. They then went and invested an awful lot of money in the 2016 campaigns. So I'm citing a number there for across all of the different PACs they were funding, 15 million. So the fear-inducing kind of campaigns that they started to roll out in 2015 to 16 included, of course, Defeat Crooked Hillary, which many of you might be familiar with. I'm going to play you a short clip of the type of messaging that would include just now, again with the help of Facebook. So you'll just get can you hear that?
Not on screen.
The screen went out.
Oh,
It's not on.
In my.
anyone? Help?
John, how do you know how to get that?
Well, what's there is there, but she's got the PowerPoint, so it's connected.
Oh, it's not in the
Can
PowerPoint.
someone help?
It's not connected to the PowerPoint.
Yep.
Is that the presentation?
No, that was the previous. Sorry. We got it?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Yes.
Make it big.
About me, if we got along well.
Yeah.
Welcome, one and all, to the Late Show. I'm your host, Stephen Colbert. Folks, Donald Trump
I don't know what's going on there.
losing
Sorry.
it, and he did not have a surplus of inches
like
to
it.
start with. The impeachment vultures are circling. He's worried. He knows there's a lot of meat left on that bone. And it's getting gamey. I'll give you the latest in our ongoing segment, Don and the Giant Impeach.
Refresh the web page.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
just did.
Yeah. Okay.
There you go, Art.
Yes, yeah.
And unmute.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm
Sorry.
And then,
We got along well, that would be good.
Make America #1 is responsible for the content of this advertising.
so you get the idea. This was basically designed to fit in with the whole lock her up kind of theme. They were testing this kind of messaging on neurotics, basically. This kind of fear-driven messaging, they were targeting at people who are the most fearful in our society. They would deliberately try to find those people and send those messages to those people and measuring how much they'd be scared by it and so on. Just very wrong. So the whole
Nice
kind of
things about me, if we got along well, that
Sorry.
would be good.
So the whole kind of like experimentation side of it is very disturbing in itself. But where did that come from? I want to show you a little bit about like the origins of this company, who were essentially a psychological warfare specialist firm. You'll all be familiar with Chris Wiley, who was the whistleblower who helped to expose the story. A lot of the media attention is focused on Facebook, but I want to make sure you are aware of the fact that this isn't about PR, and this isn't about online advertising. This is actually about information warfare. And I think that's something that people haven't quite picked up on over here, is the fact that this was a company which I first discovered while I was researching counter-terrorism propaganda during the Iraq War. So I was going around interviewing people who work for information warfare contractors for our governments. They had a central hub, a research centre at the heart of SCL Group, called the Behavioural Dynamics Institute, who did research on, terrorism and insurgency and all these kinds of psychological triggers that you might want to shift a particular, very violent group in a particular direction. This is the research hub that is also at the heart of Cambridge Analytica. And the kind of research that they were doing, which then formed these kinds of campaigns, grew out of military-funded research, funded by DARPA and DSTL, the British equivalent. They were also developing these ideas on how you might go about this, gathering this data and targeting and so on, with the help of the company intelligence giant Palantir. The structures of the companies are also extremely complex and really important to understand the fact that they hide behind these kinds of corporate structures, because we're not going to be able to understand how to pick apart these kinds of companies and stop this happening again if we don't figure out how to make those company infrastructures transparent. It's not just about Facebook and Facebook data. It's about a surveillance infrastructure that has been married together with marketing techniques, with lobbying firms, with intelligence contractors that have been working for our governments. Contractors become even more valuable for national security the more flexible they are, the more they've worked all the way around the world. And when they're not just solely a government contractor, they can deploy easily in places around the world as PR companies, and these kinds of fronts are very helpful for our governments. So I would argue that this is why they had never sort of challenged this kind of operation, and why it's still not really being discussed now. I interviewed the CEO of the defence contracting side of the business, Nigel Oakes, and he was talking to me about how people coming to them are not ethical. They're not wanting to do this in the most ethical way. They're coming to get the dirty tricks to go back against their opponents. They were working in deeply problematic and violent campaigns for dictators and people who are human rights abusers. The person you can see on the right of your screen was actually indicted by Mueller. He was working in the Oregon campaign, Sam Patton, and I interviewed him for my research. He also was the lead strategist on the 2015 campaign in Nigeria. And I just want to play you a video which is a little disturbing, just to warn you in advance. And it was a video that was developed for that campaign, a montage basically of violent previous campaigns.
Scary, very uncertain, Sharia for all.
So the videos included content where people were being dismembered, where people were having their throats cut, and bled to death in a ditch.
Okay, you get the idea. I'm not going to play the whole thing. But this is the same company that Chris Vickery was just talking about, AIQ. Were involved with the, they were instructed to distribute that video. So this was practice that Cambridge Analytica had in essentially fanning the flames of extremism, but also voter suppression. They were basically trying to scare people into not voting in that election. They also worked with Israeli hackers in Nigeria and in many other elections. And I'm going to be revealing in my book some aspects of the interference in the US election. I'll talk about that more after it's published. Until then, I'll just briefly mention something I thought as incredibly problematic, and that was the fact that these people were double dealing around the world. So you have a company which is working for NATO, countering Russia, and at the same time they were pitching to the company Lukoil, a Russian FSB-linked oil company. They also had, in addition to the developer that Chris mentioned there was another data scientist on the Trump campaign who was a Russian citizen. There's huge amounts of links to Russia and problematic relationships with Ukraine and so on, which will be included in my book. And I'm going to go into that much more in the book. Now, our governments knew what was going on, I would argue, because there's no way on earth they could have been running SCL campaigns in the elections in Eastern Europe and also defense work in Eastern Europe for the other side and not have known this. I mean, surely. So why did they not do anything? And I think these are really important questions that need to be asked, especially as Cambridge Analytica personnel are still working on the Trump campaign for 2020. There are at least 3 people, I believe there are 5 people, working on the Trump 2020 campaign from Cambridge Analytica, and we have to look at what they are doing, because Brad Parscale has said that the Trump campaign is going to be bigger, better, and badder in terms of the data machine behind it for 2020. So why are we not doing anything about the actual influence industry that works in these elections? We are pretending it's advertising for the modern day, and actually this is a hybrid system that has fused intelligence operations with PR. And it's a globally massively expanding industry. It's a multi-billion-dollar economy, and there is no willingness to change anything. We have to think about how these companies then merge and change and evolve and reinvent themselves, and look at ways that we can make this a much more transparent system and identify where the vulnerabilities are. These people were being targeted by Russia and, you know, making us very vulnerable in our elections. And so what we really need is new methods of governance and new methods of transparency. It's not enough to have control and consent over data, because people don't know what they're doing with it. Thank you very much.
Michigan Election Reform Alliance. I have heard a lot of people in finance talk about how China nearly owns the continent of Africa at this point. They've been quietly buying up land and companies. And I wonder what you can tell us about China's activities in this realm. You've mentioned Ukraine and Russia and so forth.
Sure. I'm not a specialist on China, I'll be honest with you. I do know little bits and pieces of where they fit into the picture currently with respect to Cambridge Analytica and so forth, but honestly, China is not my specialism, so I think back out to answering that. But I would say that, you know, they do have a huge infrastructure. They're funding like loads of new companies that are being set up in this kind of sector. Also, we have, you know, a lot of work being done in Asia on like facial recognition technologies and adapting those in surveillance systems to targeting people for, you know, not just coercion, but also persuasion and influence campaigns. And those are the same kinds of technologies that are being delivered here. And that's the scary thing, is they seem to be ahead of these systems, and then we're bringing them in to try and make ourselves more secure. Well, actually, we're not. We're creating vulnerabilities that can then be weaponized by other countries, whether it be Russia or the UAE or China or whoever it might be. We have enemies at home and abroad, and these systems can be weaponized by them all. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Steve Rosenfeld. I've written a little bit for some American audiences on some disinformation stuff. So I have 2 questions.
You speak up.
Yeah, okay. 2 questions. First, about 2016. My understanding was that Brad Parscale said that they didn't need to use the Cambridge Analytica stuff because they had better data and profiling by going directly into Facebook. Is that correct? They stopped at a certain point, I thought.
Okay, so I think this is a little bit of their PR and spin post Cambridge Analytica. So they definitely used Facebook data. But I would say that it's harder to evidence them using it on the Trump for America campaign. I believe that they were using it on all the PACs, which were pushing Trump. So the Crooked Hillary PAC, all of these kinds of, they were all pushing Trump.
Right, but I thought the micro-targeting of on the recipients through their advertising engine was done through Facebook. That would be correct.
Well, they were doing all of the personality testing, definitely, and using that to target Facebook ads. So that was definitely happening. They were also using the Facebook data on the Trump campaign, but I believe they weren't using Ocean on the Trump for America.
Okay, so what I hear about 2020 is that 2016 stuff is like kindergarten.
Yeah.
And what I've heard is that basically everything that's online that flies digitally can be caught and monitored in real time in every direction, and you have this giant cat and mouse game where people are trying to detect the provenance of stuff, and then they're to see the targeting and evaluate the target. We can get some counter message from a campaign to blunt first impressions, and people are not going to know what's hitting them from right and left. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah. I would also say I'm scared of both sides. I think this is really deeply disturbing because you know what, the Republicans are definitely weaponizing all of this to the max, okay? But also I would be worried that Democrats might be amassing these kinds of technologies themselves because they're scared of the other side. And what we don't need is a rush to arms and a spiraling out of control of these kinds of systems. We need to act now. We already have huge amounts of vulnerability of our data and floating around being sold on the black market. What we need to do is to strengthen our systems and stop this being utilized by either side.
Yeah, well, the thing I just described to you was from a Democrat consulting firm that was working for Black Lives Matter. And they claim they can trace something back to like the 10th or 20th time it appears, and then they can try to figure out who got it and whether or not they need to send them a counter message. But it still strikes me as all playing defense. It's psychological, whoever throws the first punch wins.
We need to make this not possible. and a key part of that is not just controlling the data privacy and so on and giving people control of their data. We have to actually, stop the money that's being funneled into these systems. We need to make our, money in politics more transparent. And it's a combination of these things, as well as ensuring there's some kind of accountability for the companies concerned, because at the moment they're lawless.
First up, I want to thank you for 2 years ago when you came into the internet. You were one of the first presenters, and I think one of the best, because you shared a perspective that a lot of people don't have in this country, that after the Help America Vote Act passed, that they did weaponize the voter database with $2 billion. And they nationalized these databases in this case, and they all interlocked. And by 2006, the Republican Party knew if you liked anchovies on your pizza, okay? And now we're into 2019. And my question is something that I fear, because I've been studying the voter database ever since Greg Palast in 2005 said, hey, John, It was only 2 billion for the equipment, it was 2 billion over here, watch out. And now to see where we are right now, and to see our country is turning into tribes, okay? And then you have a president who's starting to say things like, well, he said the last election that it was stolen even though he won. And now if he loses, what is he going to do because of all the misinformation? Because we're not all sharing the same facts anymore, okay? There's other facts. And I'm fearful, but I want somebody who's really studied this, your perspective, as from somebody across the pond coming over here and seeing how insane our country has turned into, like maybe a banana republic almost, where I used to live in Latin America. But anyway, if you could share, because I'm terribly concerned for my grandchildren. I'm very concerned about what's coming next. This is the biggest election ever, and if we don't prepare and be proactive, I think we're in very big problems to wake people up. Thank you.
Well, the big point I want to make here is this is a global phenomenon. This isn't just about America. And these, people are still working in European elections. Cambridge Analytica people working for a new company, helped to, worked on the recent presidential elections in Ukraine. We have, they're all over in the world still. And these people had 700 terabytes of data. That is huge, and that was, when they went bust a couple of years ago. So, what's been done with that data now? We don't have any guarantee that that's been deleted, and I know it hasn't. But the point here is like, what are they doing next? And the things that they were learning out of this campaign are that actually if you target people in certain ways, certain types of people with fear-based messaging, and they knew who to go for, then that will be the most effective. And if you imagine a scenario where both sides decide to weaponize that, so we are all being made fearful of each other. This, is a world where we will self-destruct. This is a country where people have guns. Cambridge Analytica working for the NRA as well, with this fear-based messaging. It's unsurprising to me how this is, cycling out of control. And what we need to do is to control these methods, because there's no way on earth we can handle this, I think, psychologically. And deal with the important issues like climate change. Why are we not fearful about climate change? No, we're being turned against each other instead. We need to be worrying about our future and how we move towards that. And data needs to be repurposed for the common good. So we need new legislation that will do that. Sorry, thank you. And the next question.
I just thought, is this working? I just thought that maybe this would be that I'd like. So I'd like people to pay attention to the laws that are restricting our access to this information, like the Whistleblower Protection Act for intelligence community professionals. There's a lot of cutouts that regular federal workers don't have. And if we want this information so that we can do anything about it, 2 pieces of legislation that we need to pay close attention to are the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act that takes people like our second speaker and disallows him to do work on the people's behalf, and the Whistleblower Protection Act, the cutout specifically for intelligence professionals, because I'd love to tell you everything.
Thank you. And to just add on to that, I want to point out that there's a wonderful person in the audience here called Delphine Helgand, who has been helping me no end with my own data security, and she's the director of an amazing organization called the Signals Network, who look after whistleblowers. So I just want to give a big shout out to that, because there's not enough funding that goes to these kinds of organizations, and they are so important. At the time when I was getting death threats and being targeted, these people were there when I needed them, and it's a terrifying thing to go through. And what we need is to enable infrastructure infrastructure that will enable people to speak out when they need to and protect people and enable good academic work to happen that is, truth-telling, as well as the journalism that we all rely on as well. Thank you.
Given a lot of exhortations, we should do this, we should do that. I'm always a little suspicious of these. Where is the political will going to come from to enact these reforms?
From all of us turning out and demonstrating and, well, yes, I'm hoping there's millions of people watching and tuning in on Facebook right now who are about to, end their Facebook accounts, delete them forever, and then get out on the streets and start rabble-rousing and making sure they petition their, legislators to make sure that we change things.
You have to be clear that these issues, which are still very
Yes.
breaking issues.
People still don't understand it. That's the trouble. Which is why I'm shouting loudly.
Emma, I just want to say that I'm very, very deeply concerned with the things you're talking about, and also what Chris Vickery and also Benny were discussing. And I'm connected with more than one source of funding, and I want to talk to you. And I am very scared about, just like John, about our country and the divisions. Okay, thank you.
I'm looking forward to speaking with you afterwards. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Good job.